On an overcast morning, Carl parked his car in front of the modest house that was set to be demolished. As the chief engineer of a renowned construction company, he was used to delicate situations, but this one seemed particularly uncomfortable. His eyes surveyed the site with an expression of indifference, while the workers awaited instructions. It's just another house, Carl thought, but something inside him seemed to disagree. He got out of the car and walked over to the small crowd of residents who had gathered to protest. There was a mix of anger and despair in their eyes, but Carl maintained his professional demeanor. "Let's stick to the plan," he ordered firmly, trying to ignore the emotions in the air. The shouts of protest grew louder, but he remained impassive, determined to follow the construction company's schedule. The workers hesitated, looking to Carl for a final confirmation. Some tried to argue about the sentimental value of the place for the residents, but he cut off any attempt at dialogue with an impatient gesture. "We're not here to discuss feelings. The land is worth much more than this old house," he said, without looking at anyone in particular. For him, it was a matter of business, and business was business. However, there was something about the atmosphere of that place that deeply bothered him. Every brick of the house seemed to tell a story. Every window held memories. Carl tried to push these thoughts aside and focus on what needed to be done. "We can't delay any longer," he muttered to himself, adjusting the watch on his wrist. He knew that behind the emotions of the residents, there was a much larger financial issue at stake. As the machines prepared to start, an elderly couple emerged from the crowd. They advanced with difficulty, struggling through the tumult to approach Carl. The woman, with gray hair and a tired look, held her husband's hand firmly. There was a silent plea in her eyes that Carl couldn't ignore, but he pushed away the compassion that began to grow in his heart, reminding himself of the value of the land. The confusion grew as more residents gathered, all begging for the demolition to be cancelled. Carl, however, was resolute. He tried to maintain calm and emotional distance, even though the circumstances made it increasingly difficult. "You have to understand," he began, trying to sound more understanding but failing. "There's a need for development here, something that will bring benefits for everyone." As he turned to give the signal to the workers, he felt a chill down his spine. The sound of small footsteps echoed in the tense silence, and all eyes turned to the door of the house. A little girl appeared, her golden hair shining in the dim morning light. Carl froze, his heart racing. That sight brought a flood of emotions, but he didn't know why. He only knew that he couldn't proceed without understanding what was happening. The girl walked slowly to the entrance, looking at the crowd with an innocent expression. Carl felt a lump form in his throat. Something about that scene was about to change everything. The indifference he had maintained with such effort was beginning to crumble, giving way to a feeling he couldn't yet identify. At that moment, he knew the day was far from ending as planned. The elderly couple approached Carl with pleading eyes. The woman, with a trembling voice, was the first to speak. "Please, sir, don't destroy our house. We have nowhere else to go. We've lived here for decades. All our moments are within these walls." The man beside her nodded, his expression showing deep sadness. Carl, fighting against the compassion growing in his chest, kept a neutral expression. "I'm sorry, but the land has already been sold. It's a matter of business, nothing personal," he replied, trying to sound firm. The man, with a raspy voice, intervened. "Business? And what are we supposed to do with our lives? What do we do with all the memories we've built here?" He took a step forward, trying to stay calm. "This is our home, sir. We're not just numbers or data in a financial report." Carl looked away, feeling the weight of the elderly man's words. He knew he was facing a difficult decision, but his professional obligations seemed to speak louder. The woman insisted, now with tears in her eyes. "We have grandchildren who come here, memories from when our daughter was little. Please, sir, don't take this away from us." The sincerity in her voice made Carl hesitate for a moment. He took a deep breath and said, "I understand that it's difficult, but the construction company has already made the investment. There's nothing that can be done now." He tried to sound resolute, but each word seemed to weigh on his conscience. The workers watched the scene, some whispering among themselves. It was evident that the situation was becoming emotionally charged. The elderly man, trying one last time, spoke with determination. "We're willing to do anything. We can pay whatever it takes to stay here." Carl looked at him with a contained expression of sadness. "It's not a matter of money, sir. The land was sold for a larger project, something that will benefit many people," he explained, trying to justify his actions. At that moment, the woman turned to the crowd and raised her voice. "Did you hear that? We're expendable in the name of progress. Is this how the world works now?" Her words echoed among those present, and some began murmuring in agreement. Carl felt a wave of heat rise to his face. He wasn't used to being the villain of the story, but there he was, facing the consequences of his decisions. Trying to control the situation, Carl raised his hand in a gesture of peace. "Please, let's stay calm. I know this is hard, but there are other ways to resolve this," he said, trying to calm everyone down. The woman looked at him with an expression of despair. "Resolve? How? By kicking us out of our home?" she asked, her voice filled with emotion. Carl felt the weight of the situation grow heavier. "We can help with finding a new home," he offered, knowing that his words sounded hollow at that moment. The elderly man slowly shook his head. "It's not the house. It's what it represents to us," he said, with overwhelming sadness in every word. Carl found himself without answers, lost between his responsibilities and the reality before him. He knew he was facing a moral crossroads, but before he could make a decision, a soft sound caught his attention. The couple turned toward the door of the house, where little Sharon appeared once again. "Daddy?" the girl called out in a low voice, cutting through the silence like a blade. The word echoed in Carl's mind, making his heart race. He looked at the girl, and for a moment, everything around him seemed to disappear. "Sharon." The word left his lips almost as a whisper, as he felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The elderly couple also turned to her with expressions of surprise. The moment was about to become something much deeper and more unexpected than anyone could have imagined. Sharon's appearance at the door brought an unexpected change in the atmosphere. Carl was still in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Sharon, is it you?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. The girl, with a confused look, timidly replied, "Yes, Daddy. Is it really you?" Silence enveloped the place as everyone around watched the unexpected reunion. The elderly couple looked at Carl, surprised by the revelation. "Is she your daughter?" the man asked, perplexed. Carl simply nodded, trying to process the situation. The girl ran into her father's arms, and Carl hugged her as if it were the last time. "I can't believe it. After all this time," he murmured, holding her tightly. The woman, still emotional, approached hesitantly. "We took care of her as if she were our own," she said, with a mix of relief and sadness. Carl looked at her with gratitude in his eyes, but also with a pain that only he could understand. "I thought I'd never see her again," he confessed, feeling tears welling up. The residents, who had previously been angry with Carl, now watched the scene with empathy. The silence was broken only by the girl's sobs, who didn't fully understand what was happening. "They took very good care of me, Daddy. They never left me alone," Sharon said, with the innocence of a child. The elderly man, emotional, added, "She's an amazing girl. We did the best we could." Carl nodded, acknowledging the sacrifice of the couple he was about to displace. The tension in the air seemed to dissolve, giving way to an unexpected sense of unity. Carl stood up, still holding Sharon, and turned to the couple. "I owe you so much. I have no words to thank you," he said sincerely. The woman shook her head with a melancholic smile. "You don't need to thank us. We just did what anyone would do," she replied, trying to hide the emotion in her voice. Carl knew those words meant more than they could express. Sharon, curious as any child, looked at Carl and asked, "Are we going home, Daddy?" The simple question brought a flood of emotions to Carl. "Yes, dear, we're going home," he replied, but with a note of uncertainty in his voice. The elderly man observed the moment and, noticing Carl's hesitation, offered, "If you need time, we can take care of her a little longer." Carl shook his head, grateful but determined. "No, we've lost too much time already. She's coming with me now." The woman, holding back tears, stepped forward. "You're lucky, Mr. Carl. She's a special girl," she said, caressing Sharon's face. The girl smiled, still not fully understanding what was happening, but feeling the affection and concern around her. Carl looked at the two of them, feeling an immense weight on his chest. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my daughter," he said sincerely. The man nodded with an understanding look. "It's difficult, but I believe everything happens for a reason," he said, trying to find comfort in the situation. Carl looked at Sharon, feeling a mix of joy and guilt. He knew this was just the beginning of a long journey of redemption and adjustment. With a deep sigh, he turned to the workers. "The demolition is suspended for now," he announced, surprising everyone. The revelation of how Sharon had ended up at that simple house in the countryside left Carl surprised. The elderly couple, still emotional from the reunion, began to tell the story. "We found Sharon 3 months ago, wandering alone on the road leading to the big city," the man began. The woman nodded, adding, "She was scared and didn't know where she came from. We decided to take her home and care for her." Carl listened intently, his heart aching as he imagined what his daughter had gone through. "She was so small and frightened. We didn't know her name or where she came from," the woman continued, gently stroking Sharon's hair. "She barely spoke, only cried. It was difficult at first, but over time, she started to trust us." Sharon, holding Carl's hand, listened to the story with curiosity, as if hearing about someone else. The man continued, his voice choked with emotion. "We tried to find her family, but without information, it was impossible. All we could do was give her a home." Carl felt a mix of gratitude and pain hearing those words. "You were incredible with her. I don't know what to say," he stammered, trying to hold back tears. The woman, with a sad smile, replied, "We did nothing more than anyone with a heart would do." Sharon looked at Carl with innocent eyes. "They called me Star, Daddy," she said with a shy smile. Carl smiled back, feeling a pang in his heart thinking of all the moments he had missed. "Star? It's a beautiful name, my little one," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The man explained, "She brightened our lives when she arrived. It was as if a star had fallen from the sky to give us hope." Carl took a deep breath, trying to absorb everything he was hearing. "I don't know how to thank you. You took care of her as if she were your own," he said sincerely. The woman smiled, wiping away a tear. "She became our daughter in a way, but we always knew that one day her real family would find her," she confessed. Carl nodded, feeling a mix of joy and guilt. He knew he would have to repay in some way all the love that the couple had given his daughter. Sharon, still holding Carl's hand, looked at the man and woman with affection. "I like them a lot, Daddy. They helped me when I was lost," she said with a child's sincerity. Carl knelt beside her, caressing her face. "I know, dear, and I'm very grateful to them for that," he replied, feeling overwhelming emotion. He turned to the couple and said, "You will always be a part of her life. Always." The man nodded, emotional. "We know that now is the time to let her go, but that doesn't mean it will be easy," he said, with a melancholic smile. The woman agreed, holding Sharon's hands. "She will always have a place in our hearts, wherever she may be," she added, her voice choked with emotion. Carl felt a deep connection with the couple, who had done so much for his daughter without expecting anything in return. With a sigh, Carl stood up and looked at Sharon. "Shall we go home, Star?" he asked, using the affectionate nickname. The girl smiled, nodding enthusiastically. The elderly couple watched as Carl picked Sharon up, feeling a mix of sadness and joy. They knew it was the beginning of a new chapter, both for Sharon and for themselves. Carl looked at them one last time and said, "Thank you. You are part of our family now." 3 months earlier, Carl and his family's lives had changed drastically. It all started at an amusement park, a place where laughter and joy should have been the only presences. Carl and his wife, Anna, were busy with their older son while Sharon played nearby. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared. "Sharon! Sharon!" Anna shouted, her voice filled with panic. Carl ran in all directions, asking everyone if they had seen his daughter. Anguish filled their hearts. The park, once vibrant and welcoming, transformed into a maze of despair. Anna, with tears streaming down her face, grabbed Carl's arm. "She was here, right here," she said, pointing to the spot where Sharon should have been. The older son, feeling guilty, mumbled apologies, trying to explain that he got distracted for a moment. Carl tried to stay calm, but the sense of loss was overwhelming. "We'll find her, Anna. She must be around here somewhere," he said, trying to sound confident. The search intensified, and each passing minute increased their despair. Carl sought help from the park staff, while Anna called out Sharon's name amidst the crowd. "Please, has anyone seen my daughter? She's small with golden hair," she pleaded, as people around began to grasp the gravity of the situation. The park was closed, and all visitors were questioned. But there was no sign of Sharon. Carl felt the weight of guilt and failure, his heart crushed by the absence of his little girl. The police were called, and an official search began. Helicopters hovered above, and sniffer dogs were brought in to assist. Carl and Anna were taken to a security room, where they were questioned about what had happened. "We can't lose hope," one of the officers said, trying to comfort them. But as the hours passed, hope began to fade. Carl looked at Anna, seeing the reflection of his own pain in her eyes. "I should have kept an eye on her," he murmured, clenching his hands tightly. The following days were a blur of media interviews, public appeals, and missing posters plastered around the city. Carl could barely sleep, tormented by nightmares. Anna retreated into her own world, refusing to believe that Sharon could be lost forever. "She will come back to us, Carl. She will," she repeated, as if trying to convince herself. Carl just held her, struggling to find the right words, but always failing. The family's routine became a constant search for answers. Carl hired private detectives, conducted online searches, and followed every lead, no matter how weak. "We can't give up," he told himself over and over like a mantra. The older son, sensing the family tension, tried to help, but his guilt was evident. "I should have taken better care of her," he whispered, and despite the pain, Carl tried to comfort him. "It's not your fault," he said, but the truth was that everyone felt guilty. Time passed, and the leads began to dry up. The city continued with its life, but for Carl and Anna, time had stopped. The feeling of despair was palpable, and each day felt like an eternity. Depression settled in the house, and the silence was a constant reminder of Sharon's absence. But Carl refused to give up. He knew that somehow his daughter was out there, waiting to be found, and he would do anything to bring her back. Carl was still in shock from the unexpected reunion with Sharon. With a trembling voice, he called his wife, Anna. "Honey, I found our daughter. Sharon is here, alive," he said, trying to control his emotions. On the other end of the line, there was an anguished silence before Anna responded, her voice choked with emotion. "This is a miracle. I can't believe it." Carl could feel Anna's emotion, but before he could say more, he heard a muffled sound and then silence. Worry washed over Carl. "Anna? Anna, are you there?" he asked desperately. On the other end, someone picked up the phone, and an unfamiliar voice said, "She fainted. I'm calling an ambulance." Carl felt a tightness in his chest. "Please take care of her. I'm heading to the hospital right now," he responded, trying to stay calm. He looked at Sharon, who seemed confused, and the elderly couple beside her. "I need to go. My wife needs me." The elderly couple approached, trying to comfort Carl. "Go, we'll take care of Sharon until you return," the woman said, holding the girl's hand. Carl looked at her with gratitude. "Thank you. I'll be back as soon as possible," he promised before running to the car. As he drove to the hospital, his mind was a storm of emotions. He had found Sharon, but now Anna was in danger. It was like an emotional roller coaster taking him to extremes he never imagined. At the hospital, Carl was greeted by a doctor who informed him that Anna was in stable condition but needed rest. She had an emotional shock. We'll monitor her and see how she recovers, the doctor explained. Carl entered the room where Anna was lying with her eyes closed. He approached, taking her hand. Sharon is alive, Anna. She's okay, he said, tears in his eyes. Anna slowly opened her eyes, looking at Carl. I knew she would come back to us, she whispered with a weak smile. Carl felt an immediate relief, but he knew there was still much to be resolved. He left the room and called the elderly couple, informing them about Anna's condition. She's going to be okay, but I need more time here, he said. The woman replied understandingly, Don't worry, she's safe with us. Carl sighed in relief. Thank you, you are true angels, he responded, feeling a deep connection with the people who had saved his daughter. While waiting for more news about Anna, Carl reflected on everything that had happened. The situation seemed surreal, and he could hardly believe that Sharon was back in his life. But what touched him the most was the selfless gesture of the couple who took care of her. They are incredible, Carl thought, admiringly. He knew that, somehow, he needed to repay them for everything they had done. But the question of how to do so still lingered in his mind. Meanwhile, Sharon was being treated like a princess. The woman prepared a warm meal for her while the man read stories to keep her calm. They make me feel at home, Sharon said, with a smile that melted anyone's heart. The couple knew that her presence in their lives was coming to an end, but they were determined to savor every moment. She is a blessing, even if only for such a short time, the woman said, tears in her eyes. Carl, still at the hospital, received a message from the elderly couple informing him that everything was fine. He felt grateful to have found such kind people. We'll get through this together, he thought, determined to keep those who helped his daughter close. He knew that Sharon's return to his life was a new beginning, full of challenges and adjustments, but he was ready to face whatever came, with the help of everyone around him. Upon returning from the hospital, Carl went straight to the Souza family's house. He was eager to learn more about the 3 months Sharon had spent under their care. Donna Maria greeted him with a warm smile, while Mr. Souza was sitting on the porch, watching Sharon play. How's Anna? Donna Maria asked with genuine concern. Carl smiled, relieved to bring good news. She's going to be okay, but she needs rest, he replied, feeling a momentary relief. Donna Maria invited Carl inside, and the three of them sat at the kitchen table. With a cup of coffee in hand, Carl was eager to hear about Sharon's days there. She's a charming girl, Donna Maria began, with a twinkle in her eyes. When she arrived, she was so scared and confused. She didn't know where she was or how she had ended up with us. Carl listened intently, his heart heavy as he imagined what his daughter had gone through. Mr. Souza, in his calm voice, added, We did our best to make her feel safe. First, it was hard for her to sleep at night. Many times, she woke up crying, calling for you and Anna. Carl felt a lump in his throat. It must have been terrible for her, he murmured, more to himself. Donna Maria nodded with an understanding look. But over time, she started to feel at home. We created a routine for her, and that helped to calm her, she explained, as she gently patted Carl's hand. Carl wanted to know more about Sharon's daily life. Did she talk a lot about us? He asked, trying to control his emotions. Donna Maria smiled. Yes, always. She told stories about her family, the things she loved to do, and, of course, how much she loved you all. Carl took a deep breath, trying to take it all in. We tried to maintain a normal life for her, Mr. Souza said. She went with us to the market, helped Donna Maria in the kitchen, and loved listening to my stories about when I was young, he added with a smile. Donna Maria leaned forward a bit, as if to emphasize an important point. She brought so much joy to us, Carl. Even in difficult times, she always had a smile on her face, she said, her eyes welling up with tears. Carl looked at her, feeling immense gratitude. You did an incredible job. I don't know how to thank you, he said sincerely. Mr. Souza shook his head. We didn't do it for thanks. We did it because it was the right thing to do, he replied humbly. Sharon, who had been playing in the yard, came running into the kitchen, interrupting the conversation. Daddy, look what I made, she said, showing a drawing she had made. Carl smiled and took the drawing, feeling emotional. It's beautiful, sweetheart, he said, hugging her. Donna Maria looked at them with a sad but content smile. She's a natural artist, she said, stroking Sharon's hair. Carl turned to the couple and said, You will always be part of our family. I can't take that away from you. Mr. Souza nodded, understanding the depth of Carl's statement. We're happy to have been part of her life, even if only for a short period, he said, with a tone of farewell. Donna Maria looked at Carl and added, She will always have a place in our hearts. If you ever need us, we'll be here. Carl, touched by their generosity, felt he needed to do more. We'll stay in touch, and you will always be welcome in our home. Always, he assured them firmly. The moment was one of farewell but also new beginnings. Carl knew that, although Sharon was coming home, the Souzas would always be a part of their lives. We'll find a way to stay connected, he promised as he prepared to leave. Before reaching his car, Carl had an idea. He knew he needed to find a way to maintain the bond with the couple. He was also concerned about Anna's emotional state, which had been fragile since Sharon's disappearance. With that in mind, Carl returned to the couple's house and proposed a solution he believed would benefit everyone. I would like you to move closer to us, to continue being part of Sharon's life. Carl began, looking at both of them seriously. Donna Maria was surprised, but before she could respond, Carl continued, Anna is going through a difficult time. She needs emotional support and Sharon does too. Your presence would be a great help to all of us. Mr. Souza thought for a moment, looking at his wife before responding. Are you suggesting that we move to the city? He asked, a bit skeptical. Carl nodded. Yes, and I would like to hire Donna Maria to help take care of Sharon and Anna. It would be an essential support for our family. Donna Maria, touched by the proposal, looked at Carl and then at her husband. Are you saying you want me to be officially part of their lives? She asked, trying to hold back tears. Carl smiled and replied firmly, Yes, you are already part of our family. We want you to continue to be. Mr. Souza, still a little hesitant, finally nodded. We've always wanted the best for Sharon, and it seems that includes being close to you, he said with a soft smile. Carl knew the move would be a significant adjustment for the Souzas, but he was determined to make the transition as smooth as possible. I will arrange a comfortable house near ours. It won't be anything grand, but it will be cozy, he explained. Donna Maria, touched by Carl's generosity, said, You are being very kind. We didn't expect any of this. Carl shook his head. It's not kindness. It's the least we can do after everything you've done for Sharon. Sharon, who was nearby, overheard part of the conversation and ran to hug Donna Maria. Will you stay close to me forever? She asked with hopeful eyes. Donna Maria, emotional, replied, Yes, dear, we'll always be close. Mr. Souza smiled at Carl and said, It seems we have no choice, do we? Carl laughed, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in a long time. Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of all the details, he assured them. Sharon's return home was filled with emotions for everyone. Carl, Anna, and the older son waited anxiously in the living room. The moment was anticipated with a mix of nervousness and joy. Is she coming? Anna asked, her voice trembling and tears streaming down her face. Sharon entered the room, holding Donna Maria's hand. The girl looked around, hesitant, as if the surroundings were vaguely familiar. When her eyes met Anna's, there was a moment of recognition. Mommy? Sharon asked, her voice a whisper filled with uncertainty. Anna, unable to contain her tears, ran to embrace her daughter. Yes, my love, it's me, she replied, holding Sharon tightly as if she would never let her go. Carl approached, placing his hand on Anna's shoulder. The older son, visibly emotional, watched the scene with a shy smile. "I'm sorry, Sharon. I should have taken better care of you at the park," he said, his voice choked with guilt. Sharon looked at her brother and, with a sweet smile, replied, "It's okay. I know you didn't want me to get lost." The boy nodded, relieved by his younger sister's forgiveness. Donna Maria watched everything with a serene look, feeling happy to be present at such a special moment. Mr. Souza, a bit shy, entered the room and stood discreetly beside Donna Maria. Carl noticed their discomfort and, with a welcoming gesture, said, "You are part of this family. Make yourselves at home." Mr. Souza smiled, clearly moved. "Thank you, Carl. It's an honor to be here with you," he replied humbly. The family gathered around Sharon, each trying to absorb the miracle before them. Anna, still holding her daughter, looked at Carl with bright eyes. "We're all together again," she said, feeling a deep sense of relief. Carl nodded, feeling the weight of the past few months finally lift. "Yes, we are. And we'll stay that way," he affirmed with determination. The house was filled with a sense of unity that hadn't been present for a long time. To celebrate Sharon's return, Carl organized a special dinner. The table was filled with the girls' favorite dishes, lovingly prepared by Donna Maria. "Let's make this day a milestone for a new beginning," Carl said as everyone sat down at the table. Sharon, excited, talked about her adventures with the Souzes and expressed her gratitude for everything they had done. "They helped me a lot. I'll miss them, but I'm glad they'll be nearby," she said, smiling at the couple. During dinner, Carl announced a surprise. "We found a new house for the Souzes, close by. They're going to live with us in the city, so they can continue to be part of our lives," he said, receiving applause and smiles from everyone. Donna Maria was visibly moved. "This is more than we could have imagined." "Thank you, Carl," she said, holding her husband's hand. Mr. Souza agreed, expressing his thanks with a nod. The dinner continued with laughter and lively conversations. The atmosphere was one of pure joy and relief. Carl watched his family, feeling that, despite the challenges, everything had fallen perfectly into place. "This is the beginning of a new phase, and we'll face it together," he thought, feeling an inner peace he hadn't felt in a long time. Sharon was finally home, and with the Souza's support, Carl knew that the future could only get better. The family was whole again, and that was the greatest blessing of all. With Sharon back home, the Johnson family knew they would need help to overcome the traumas of the past. Concerned about everyone's well-being, Carl organized a series of therapy sessions for the family. "We want to move forward together," he said as he explained the plan to Anna and the children. Anna, still recovering emotionally, agreed with the idea. "We need this help to rebuild our future," she stated, trying to keep her voice steady. The first sessions were intense. The therapist, an experienced and understanding woman, began with individual sessions, focusing on Anna first. "You've been through a lot, Anna. It's natural to feel this mix of emotions," the therapist said, encouraging Anna to talk about her feelings. Initially reluctant, Anna began to open up about the guilt she felt over Sharon's disappearance. "I should have been more attentive," she confessed, with tears in her eyes. Sharon also participated in the sessions, accompanied by Donna Maria, who served as a comforting figure. "It's important that she feels safe and heard," the therapist explained to Carl. Sharon spoke about her feelings of confusion and longing during the time she was away. "I missed everyone, but I was happy with the Souzes," she said, looking at Donna Maria with a loving smile. Carl felt a renewed gratitude for the couple, who had become an indispensable part of their lives. The therapist also worked with the older son, who carried a great deal of guilt over his sister's disappearance. "You were just a child. You couldn't have predicted what would happen," the therapist said, trying to ease the burden he carried. "But I should have taken better care of her," he insisted, still blaming himself. The therapist, patient, helped him understand that what happened was not his fault and that it was important to forgive himself to move forward. Donna Maria and Mr. Souza were also included in the sessions as part of Sharon's support system. "You did an incredible job, and it's important for you to know that," the therapist said, acknowledging the crucial role they played. Donna Maria, modest, replied, "We just did what our hearts told us. Sharon needed us, and we were there for her." Mr. Souza nodded, adding, "She brought joy into our lives. It was a gift to take care of her." As the weeks passed, the therapy sessions began to show results. Anna started to feel stronger and more confident. "I can't change what happened, but I can work to be a better mother moving forward," she said, with newfound determination. Carl, seeing the recovery of his wife and children, felt a deep sense of relief. "We're all healing, and that's the most important thing," he said during one of the group sessions, where everyone shared their progress. Sharon, always curious and full of energy, began to express more about her experiences and feelings. "I know everyone was worried about me, but I was in good hands," she said, holding Donna Maria's hand. The therapist encouraged Sharon to talk about what she wanted for the future. "I just want everyone to be together and happy," she said, with a bright smile. These words resonated with everyone, highlighting the common desire to find peace and happiness. The constant presence of Donna Maria and Mr. Souza helped anchor the family. They became figures of emotional support, offering advice and affection whenever needed. "We're all in this together," Donna Maria would say, always with an encouraging smile. Mr. Souza, though more reserved, showed his support through small gestures and words of wisdom. For Carl, therapy was not just a way to heal the past, but also a means to build a stronger and more united future for everyone. As the therapy sessions progressed, the Johnson family began to face the challenges of recovery. Anna, though stronger, still had her anxiety attacks, especially related to the possibility of losing Sharon again. One night, while helping Sharon get ready for bed, Anna was overwhelmed by a wave of panic. "What if it happens again?" she whispered, looking at Carl with eyes full of fear. Carl hugged her, trying to convey reassurance. "We will protect our family. You are not alone in this," he assured, stroking her hair. Nights were particularly difficult for Anna. She frequently woke up startled, reliving the nightmare of losing Sharon. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm stuck in that moment, unable to get out," she confessed during a therapy session. The therapist, understanding, encouraged her to talk about these feelings. "It's important to acknowledge your fears, but it's also crucial to remember that Sharon is here, safe with you," she said, trying to help Anna anchor herself in the current reality. Sharon, on the other hand, began to notice her mother's difficulties. One morning, after a particularly rough night, she approached Anna and said, "Mommy, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." These simple words brought unexpected comfort to Anna. "I know, dear. I just need a little time to believe that completely," Anna replied, holding her daughter's hand. This small gesture from Sharon showed how much she was growing and becoming a source of strength for the family. The older son also faced his own challenges. Despite the therapy sessions, he still felt responsible for what happened. "I know they say it wasn't my fault, but I can't help feeling this way," he said during a conversation with Carl. Carl, understanding the depth of his son's guilt, replied, "We all make mistakes, but the important thing is to learn and move forward. You are an amazing brother to Sharon, and that's what matters now." These words were a relief for the boy, although the healing process was still long. Donna Maria and Mr. Souza continued to be pillars of support for the family. Donna Maria, in particular, became a constant presence in Anna's life, offering words of encouragement and practical help whenever needed. "Remember, each day is a new opportunity to start again," she often said. Mr. Souza, with his quiet wisdom, also offered valuable advice, especially to Carl. "Recovery is not a straight line. There will be ups and downs, but the important thing is not to give up," he said in a heartfelt conversation. The difficult moments were interspersed with moments of joy. The family made it a point to celebrate small victories, like Anna's nightmare-free nights or Sharon's school achievements. "Every step is a victory," Carl said during a family meeting. These celebrations were essential to keep everyone's spirits high and remind them of the progress they were making, even if it was slow. The therapy sessions continued to be a safe space to express fears and hopes. Despite the progress, Anna's crises still emerged from time to time, like shadows that refused to disappear completely. During one of these crises, Carl called Donna Maria, who promptly came to help. "She's stuck in the past. We need to bring her back to the present," Donna Maria said with the calm and wisdom that always accompanied her. With patience and care, Donna Maria and Carl helped Anna calm down, showing her recent photos of happy moments with Sharon and the rest of the family. These challenges in recovery were a constant reminder that the path to healing was long and full of obstacles. However, the Johnson family was determined to face them together. "We'll get through this, one day at a time," Carl would say, reaffirming his commitment to keeping the family united and strong. With the support of Donna Maria and Mr. Souza, and with the love they shared, the family continued to move forward, facing their demons and celebrating their victories, no matter how small. Sharon's birthday was approaching, and the Johnson family decided to celebrate the occasion in a special way. A simple but love-filled party was planned, with all their close friends and family. The house was decorated with balloons and colorful ribbons, and the aroma of chocolate cake filled the air. Sharon, excited, helped Donna Maria with the final details. "This is the best birthday ever," she exclaimed, with a radiant smile. Carl and Anna, watching the scene, felt their hearts warm. The guests began to arrive, including Mr. Souza, who brought a special gift for Sharon. "I made this for you," he said, handing her a small carved wooden box. Sharon eagerly opened the present and found a delicate silver bracelet. "It's beautiful. Thank you, Grandpa," she said, hugging Mr. Souza. The simple yet meaningful gesture brought tears to Anna's eyes as she watched emotionally. "You are a blessing to our family," she said, thanking the couple. During the party, Carl gave a brief speech, thanking everyone for being there. "Today is a day of celebration, not just for Sharon's birthday, but for us all being together, stronger than ever," he began. "We've been through tough times, but unity and love have brought us here, and we're just starting a new phase, full of hope and happiness." Carl's words were met with warm applause, and Sharon, beside him, held his hand with a proud smile. The party continued with much joy and laughter. Sharon played with her friends and siblings, while Donna Maria and Mr. Souza chatted happily with the other guests. Anna, sitting next to Carl, watched everything with a serene look. "It seems we've finally found peace," she said, holding Carl's hand. He nodded in agreement. "Yes, and we'll keep it. We have everyone by our side, and that's what matters," he replied, squeezing her hand affectionately. At the end of the party, Carl gathered everyone for a surprise. He stood up and asked for everyone's attention. "Before we wrap up, I want to share some special news," he began with a smile. "We've decided that the Souza's house will not be demolished. They are part of our family, and we want them to have a safe home where they can always return." The announcement was met with cheers and applause. Donna Maria and Mr. Souza, moved, looked at Carl with gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means to us," said Donna Maria with tears in her eyes. Sharon, not fully understanding the situation, looked at her father and asked, "What does that mean, Daddy?" Carl smiled and explained, "It means they will always have a home where they feel safe and loved, just like us." Sharon smiled, happy with the news, and ran to hug Donna Maria. "You deserve this," she said with a child's sincerity. Mr. Souza, visibly moved, simply nodded, thanking silently. The happiness was palpable, and everyone knew that this moment would be remembered forever. As night fell, the guests began to say their goodbyes. The Johnson family and the Souzas stayed in the living room, sharing stories and laughter. "It was a perfect day," said Sharon, lying on Anna's lap. Donna Maria agreed. "Yes, it was a day to remember," she said, stroking the girl's hair. Carl, looking around, felt deep gratitude for everyone present. "We have a long road ahead, but we're ready to face any challenge together," he thought, feeling confident and hopeful. The night ended with a sense of peace and happiness. Carl and Anna, along with Sharon and their older son, bid farewell to the Souzas, promising to meet again soon. "You are always welcome here," Carl said, hugging Mr. Souza. "And you at our house," he replied with a smile. As the Souzes left, Carl felt that despite all the difficulties, life had given them a new chance, and they were ready to make the most of it with hope and love in their hearts.